welcome to Jesus for Asia Now. I'm Natalie Wood, and my husband John is joining me today as we bring an update to a project that is living under difficult and dangerous circumstances, but they do it in order to reach the people. Hi, darling. Where are you taking us today?
Well, it's a place we've been to before.
Okay.
In fact, we've had the missionaries that are there actually here in our studio.
Right, right. Mike and Michelle Cordes.
Yes.
Are their names.
And they're living in South Philippines on a big island called Mindanao.
Okay.
And they're not on the coast where most of the Adventists and the Christians are. They're way up in the mountains where it's kind of dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, we've heard some stories from them over the years.
Yeah. We first met Mike when we moved to Idaho 2005. He was going to the same church that we started going to. And that was the beginning of Jesus for Asia.
Right.
And he was in the congregation, really nice guy, friendly, outgoing, loved the Lord, and a very encouraging person to be around.
Right.
And he started coming to our faith camps.
Right.
And I remember one day we were actually at a men's retreat. There's like 8 of us or 10 of us, and he was sitting behind me, and I was thinking, man, you know, Mike, he should really get involved with God's work. So I turned to him and says, Mike, why don't you do something for God? And he told me later, he was shocked by that because he was sitting behind me thinking, I wish I had a ministry like he has. I wish I could work for the Lord like he does.
Wow.
And I turned around and said, why don't you do that? And he was just like taken back. And how did he find out about Mindanao?
Well, he met this girl online. A lovely lady, actually, Michelle.
Yes.
And this is a picture of the two of them together, Mike and Michelle.
Yes.
They got to know each other a little bit, and their story I think they've shared here before. And so I won't tell the whole thing again, but God really worked.
Yes.
I mean, God was very clear that they were to be together and they were to minister together for these people.
Yeah. And so he went to visit her, and she lives in Mindanao.
Right.
And so he was visiting, and he's like, what about all these people up in the mountains that no one's going to witness to them? So that burden just really grew on his heart. And then after they were married, they started sending Bible workers up into that area, and then they felt convicted after a few years, and they moved there full time.
Right.
And they bought some property up in the mountains, and they have a clinic and a garden and a radio station, and we're going to look at that, see what's happening there today.
Right, right. We've got several videos today, and we want to jump right into them because it's going to take some time, and we don't want to miss out on any part of the story.
Right.
So this first video, what are they doing?
They're going out to visit the different villages. Now it's not very safe to travel there, so we don't have a lot of footage, and we don't have a lot of different villages. Our videographer, we had to kind of like protect him. Just to give you an idea of some of the things they're up against, there was forces in the village below them that was actually sending mortar shells to the village above them. Some mortar shells were being lobbed over where they were living. Yeah. And like 80 people died in the village above them. So this is, you know, they've got different forces that are happening in around that area.
Wow.
Well, let's just go ahead and go right into it. Let's show some video about the project and what's happening there in the villages.
Okay.
Back at Faith Camp, when we claimed our inheritance, and as the Lord led, He led us to the top of a mountain. And that mountain was the sanctuary where the insurgencies here for the New People's Army all began. But this place is where we stood and looked over the mountains. We claimed these mountains as our inheritance. And it was here that one of our first churches was built. Later, the church had to be taken down, and because it got sandwiched in the war and the bullets were flying, and they had to move the church down the mountain to a place called Kawali. We had a school in the area for 6 months until we were asked to leave. And we still have a heavy, heavy burden for the area there. Right now we're in an area that We've been in for a lot of years now, doing vacation Bible schools, and we got a church established here. We almost had a second church established here. We had Bible workers in the area, and they were almost killed. A war broke out in front of the church that night while they were waiting for the next morning to come back to the mission post. There was insurgencies outside, people from the insurgent, and they were saying, we're going to kill the missionaries. Let's just do it now. Let's just kill them, get it over with now. And for some reason they couldn't enter. We're always looking for remote areas that have a large tribal or 100% tribal presence. And we're working in areas, of course, that are in the middle of the war zones, because that burden has been put on us to try and give the young people a new vision besides just killing each other. Today we want to talk about the elder and his story. He was a drunkard and a fighter, brawler, gambler, abusive in his home, and found God. Many times through his life he had been approached with the truth and kind of just rejected it, pushed it away. But when the missionaries were finally here years later, he couldn't shake it off.
Usa ako ka Katoliko sa una, dayon nagkinabuhi nga libre ang gusto.
So before he became an Adventist, he was a Catholic, Roman Catholic, and then the good thing before, he's not being forbidden to do anything. There's no prohibitions. He can do whatever he wants. He can hit somebody. 2014, when the ministry of GoBeDo missions came in their place, he was convinced to listen to them and hear the 28 fundamentals. What was important to him was just the three major topics about food, Sabbath, and why Adventist people don't bow down to images. And when he heard all about those truths, he was totally convinced. So before he was finished with the 28 fundamentals, then he just gave up and surrendered to God.
Ang kalainan sa kaniadto ug sa pagkakaron.
He said before they're just being called Christians, but they were not taught how to have a relationship with Christ. But now they have family worship, which bind him to have a good relationship with his family and with his family to the community. And then all of the good teachings that he had heard and he's been doing can be found in the Holy Scriptures. That's why he's very, very thankful, because now there's peace in their home.
And it wasn't just him. The other elder in this church also had a similar story. He's not here with us today. But life-changing stories for sure that only come from above and the power of God. Because of many of the members here having to go to different places because of the livelihood being taken away here, and also because of the war that's often going on in this area, there's a sincere desire from not only the elder but from the mission that this church be revived. And it's going to take a lot of work, it's going to take money, it's going to take laborers, and we're lacking laborers at this present time. It's hard to work in the mountains, and it's hard to find people willing to come up here after all these years. So we need a lot of prayers that God will send forth more laborers, because the harvest is truly ripe. And we want to see this church flourish. We want to reclaim the lost sheep, and we want God to be honored here.
In a recent email I received from him, the village that they were working with has been identified as against the government. And so they were surrounded by, that village was surrounded by the army, and 3 people have died there. But they had, the chieftain's daughter was living in their house. And we'll tell the story later. But now we have another video that focuses on more of the work that they do.
Okay.
Years ago, when we first started the work here, we taught Bible workers in a very conventional way, the doctrines, and it wasn't working. It wasn't working for reaching the heart and the cultural aspects of the people we're ministering to. They're tribal, they sacrifice pigs and chickens to their God, they worship rocks, water, trees. So we were asking the Lord, what can we do to reach this cultural divide? And the Lord told us that my way is in the sanctuary. And it just popped out of the Bible, my way is in the sanctuary. So we took the sanctuary model, the actual furniture, and we realized that there was a perfect sacrifice to be made, and that was in the Son of God. He came to the world, he gave up his seat next to his father's, on his Father's throne to become a sacrifice for us. And not only that, but you can teach diet, that Jesus Christ is our high priest, but that a manly priesthood is no longer necessary, that at the veil, when Jesus died, that was torn down. And so there's a lot of things that we can teach now in a visual to help them realize that yes, sacrifices were a reality. Your ancestors, they really had it right. But here's the way that God intended it. And God is trying to restore us. He's trying to make us healthy and happy again. And by having tribal Bible workers, which came from that lifestyle, it gives a better impact. Before Faith Camp, when I gave my heart to this mission, I was radio station manager in America. I was the editor. And God gave me some training in this field. But throughout the years, it seemed like that wasn't going to be something I would be doing. We were so busy training Bible workers and living a mission life. And then just a few years ago, the Lord began to open up the doors for radio for us. And I was excited because I've always had a burden for radio. Now we've got a radio station that has the potential of reaching over 1 million people. Not only here on the mountain in places where they may not hear the gospel, but also down in the coast. We're at a 4,000 foot elevation between a draw that goes two different directions of populated areas. And this is an enormous opportunity for people not only of animist belief, like the tribal people, but also of Christianity and Catholicism, Muslims, because on the backside of us here is quite a few Muslim communities. So this is a wonderful opportunity to share God's word, and we're looking forward to what God's going to do with this. Another aspect of ministry that God has opened up for me is cycling. Being that we have a lack of help, I'm forced to take care of my health. And so for all the years we've been here, we've been paying taxes on our stipends, and it hasn't been a big stipend. And then somebody when we went back to the U.S. one year said, you need to talk to our tax guy. So we did. And he said, wait a minute, you've been doing your taxes wrong. We got to do this right. And we got this huge tax return in 2017. And I talked to my wife. She said, why don't you buy a bike? And so I went out on a limb and prayed about it. Because we had already got to this point where everything we have is committed to the Lord, I didn't want this to be any different. So my wife said, why don't you go ahead and do it? And I said, oh yes, thank you, Lord. Thank you, wife. And I bought my enduro bike. Of course, this country is full of trails. Houses are on trails where there's no roads. And I said, Lord, I've committed this to you. You know, give me a ministry to use it for. And the Lord has opened up that ministry through sharing steps to Christ and praying with people. And the wonderful thing is they speak English. Here in the mission, there's not much English speaking. It's tribal and it's the local dialect of Visaya. So sometimes I'm trapped in not understanding unless I'm teaching classes and my wife is translating or I'm preaching. I'm on my own. My wife gets very tired and translating sometimes and living that double translated life, and she needs a rest. And so this was an outlet for me. And you know, I went in for a health check, a heart check just last year, My past life before Christian apparently did a lot of damage to my heart, and I had plugged arteries. The doctor said in my last test that my cycling had forced diversion roads, providing the needed oxygen and blood to my heart that grew around my main artery. He said, just in time. He said, if it hadn't been for that I would have died. So this has been a threefold blessing in disguise, and I'm just praising God for all the opportunities that He gives us.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Those guys live on the edge all the time.
Right, right. But
Yeah.
it's neat to see how the Lord has, you know, kind of expanded the ministry into different avenues to reach different, you know, different connections of people around them. And He's given them the idea of showing all of the doctrines from the sanctuary. That's
Yes.
so beautiful.
Oh yeah.
So beautiful.
It's a picture of the grace of God and the plan of redemption.
Right.
That people can, it helps people understand
Right.
some of the
Well,
aspects of it.
And the scripture says, you know, thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary. And so if we want to know the way, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So if we want to know the way and we want to show people the way, it's so beautifully represented in the
Yeah,
sanctuary.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful message.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, very much so.
So, and I love how they take whatever, you know, the bicycle, and they dedicate it to the Lord. And He's out there using the exercise to meet people that He wouldn't normally meet.
Right. Well, I know we have one more video
Okay.
talking about some of the challenges that they
Okay.
experience.
Okay.
For me, I would never exchange my work for God with a high-paying job.
There's been many incidences where we've encountered danger in the mountains. For an example, I had just put brand new tires and inner tubes, heavy duty inner tubes in the 200cc Honda, because the tires were completely destroyed. So we put new tires on that motorcycle, and we had 5 other motorcycles with us that day, and some of their tires were not that good, but we got to a certain part in the mountains, and we had a flat tire in the 200cc motorcycle, and we spent like 25 minutes repairing the tire. When we got to the next village, they asked us if we had seen the 300 armed men that had just passed. Well, we hadn't seen them, but we knew at that moment that the flat tire prevented us from facing them. I remember Tim Maddox came over and did a mission trip with us one year, and we were up here on this mountain, Anaho, and this was where the insurgency began back in the 1960s, and we were 8 hours away from the nearest army base. We were in a bright yellow tent. It was bright yellow, and we were right off the trailhead at the top. We were evangelizing, we were pulling teeth, we were doing a medical missionary trip. But when we went down, the military took us and they interrogated us and they scolded us for not getting permission to go there ahead of time. And they said it was the anniversary. What are you doing? That place is covered with armed men right now. We never saw them. God is our witness, we never saw them. But when we left, one of our members that was with us on that trip was taken by the other side. And she was taken for 3 days and nights, questioned about why we were there. That they were looking for me everywhere and they couldn't find me. So they took one of our members. But in any case, we were there for several days and they never saw us. Bright yellow tent. So God shielded us. He must have shielded us.
Oh, the first year in staying here is really, really scary, because we just live in a 14 by 14 house that's made of amakan, bamboo. And I think there were like 14 of us staying in the small house.
And at nighttime, rubber boots would come in. The insurgents from the Communist Party would come in around the house. I'm a very light sleeper, and I would always hear them. They're breathing around the thin bamboo walls that are surrounding us, and we're not knowing if they have bolos, which are machetes, or AK-47s. All we know is they're there. And so I would wake up my wife next to me, and she would wake up the Bible workers that were all with us and our children, and we would quietly be inside praying to God. Not only would we be praying for our safety, but we would be praying for, we'd ask the Lord, are we right with you? And that was what became most important in our mission here, is God was showing us that we needed to be right with Him. Not sometimes, but all the time.
The joy you have is really satisfying compared to the job that you can have with a big pay. Although there are a lot of difficulties, but for me, it's just not the people that are being blessed doing missionary work. My family also are also being blessed.
Over the years, we've lost some support. People have written in and said, you know, we've seen the news over there. Get your family out of there. You know, why do you insist on staying there? We're not supporting you anymore. And all we can do is say, we haven't had permission to leave. Where else would we go? The Lord gave us a calling over 10 years ago. We've got these young people surrounding us that their lives are changed. They're healthy. They're not sick anymore. God is making a difference. We're just channels. We're just instruments. But it's a joy to be an instrument. It's a joy to be a servant. You know, so when you can see a family or a village get it, you know, and put their trust in a living God, there's no greater joy for me. Again, where would we go? Where would we go?
Wow, that's powerful.
That is
you know,
so powerful.
People saying, get your family out of there, it's dangerous. And it's like, where would we go?
Yeah.
God hasn't given us permission to leave. And to think about that, you know, that's really opposite from the way most of us think.
Yeah.
You know, we think, well, yeah, it's dangerous. Let's get our family out of here. But to be like, are we right with you, Lord? And are we where you want us to be? Constantly asking. And I know that's part of what we're going to talk about next, is constantly asking God, what do you want us to do? You know, in light of the fact that it's getting more dangerous, they've had to move from some villages because of the danger there, because armed soldiers or armed men are there. And, you know, it's like to be willing to say, Lord, what do you want us to do? And then to stay put when that's the answer.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we want to move on to the next part, which is an update from the COVID-19 situation, the coronavirus situation.
Yes. Several months ago, they started seeing fear on people's faces from the jungles. And it was an unfounded fear. They didn't know why they were afraid. And so they also started seeing their donations drop. And so that's always been an indicator to them that God wants to communicate something. And so they took a whole week and spent it in prayer and fasting. And out of that came this impression from many different people that was involved with that prayer, that they should spend 80% of their time in planting food into the ground.
Okay.
And so they have tried, you saw in the video that ox, okay, pulling the plow. They've tried planting for many years, and it's a limited success because they've got a lot of bugs. They don't use pesticides, and in the tropics, you know, they get a lot of species of bugs that come in that we don't really have. So they've had limited success, but they started doing that, and the Lord has blessed. They even had a box of beans sent to them from somebody in the States several years ago, dried beans. They went out and planted those. They all came up.
Wow.
And there's a picture of the miracle beans.
Okay.
And so now, when this all happened before the lockdown happened, and the lockdown was very severe in the Philippines. You can't leave your house. You can't go anywhere in some parts. And so that was like just in time for this lockdown. So they haven't been hungry. In fact, they've had so many veggies that they're able to share and help the other villagers in the area that are suffering also. So here's a little video of the radio station. You can see it's a very small recording room, and here's the tower that looks a lot taller from the ground than it does from the air. But it reaches a long ways.
Wow.
And this is how they reach out even from while they're at home.
Wow.
Yeah. Here's Mike in his recording studio, and here's Michelle in the recording studio, and they're putting these shows together.
Okay, so now we have the story of the chieftain's daughter.
Yes. When she first came to their house, she was very cold. And she would look at you like she was looking through you. She was just, and now this is the chief of the village that has been surrounded by the government army, and 3 people have died. This is like what I learned yesterday. So this is new. But now the daughter is just warm.
So she's living with them?
She's living
Mike and
with
Michelle?
them,
Okay.
doing the school that they have, homeschool type of schooling, and learning the Christian way. And obviously they have a lot of Bible studies, and they have a lot of sharing time and things like that. But now she's had such a huge change in her life. She's warm and bubbly and a joy to be around. And you can see in this picture she's got a electric
happy smile.
Yes.
Yes, beautiful smile.
So these are the things that really make it all worthwhile. A lot of
Right.
people, you know, in their past life, they were going for money. They were going for the things of this world. But now they don't have as much of the things of this world, but they have the true gold, the true riches. That's people.
Right.
And change lives.
Right. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I know that's what keeps them going.
Absolutely.
In spite of the danger.
Keeps us all going.
Yeah. It's to tell people about Jesus and to see him work in their lives.
Yes. So Mike and Michelle, they inspire me.
Yeah. And they challenge us as well.
Right. And sometimes living here in America, you know, I want to maybe upgrade something in my house, and I think of Mike and Michelle. I'm like, you know what? That can wait till heaven. I want to do something that's going to be really impactful.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. If you would like to encourage Mike and Michelle to continue this work that God has put before them, you can contact us at Jesus for Asia, P.O. Box 1221, Collegedale, Tennessee 37315. Call us at 423-413-7321 or visit our website at jesusforasia.org. May God richly bless you until we see you next time on Jesus for Asia Now.